Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I've been playing Yakuza Like a Dragon. I'm just going to call it Yakuza 7, because that's just more convenient. I've been playing it for about 10 hours now, and I would like to just talk about it for a bit, because I've got nothing better to do until my PlayStation 5 comes in, so let's go talk about that. And just so you know, this is being recorded on the PC version, and I'll get this out of the way right away. The PC version runs great. I've been getting 100 FPS plus with everything maxed, and I've been playing for about 10 hours, and I've just finished Chapter 4, and I won't spoil anything about the story so far, but I will say that the achievement that you get at the end of Chapter 4 might be one of the worst achievements I've ever seen in my life. Shame on you, whoever localized that achievement name, because that is a terrible pun. Anyway, on with the show. Let's start by talking about the plot, and I haven't played much of the plot. As I said, I'm on Chapter 4, and there's 16 chapters in this game, or something along those lines, so I haven't seen everything yet, but I'm more than happy to tell you about what I've experienced so far. And I will say that the pacing is definitely off for one reason or another. Mainly that you kind of know what's already happening when you go in, at least for the first two chapters, because on the store page on Steam, and I'm assuming in the description of like the console marketplaces, it tells you that Ichiban Kasuga, our new main protagonist, which I will talk about in a little bit, is the victim of being shot by his former boss and then needing to figure out what the bloody hell happened. Well, here's the problem. That's the first two chapters of the game. Basically, the first two chapters are that summary expanded out into a couple of hours, and not only does it not take place in the new city, it takes place in Kamurocho, so it's really linear. And then chapters 3 and 4, while having their own little subplots going on to at least keep you interested in some of this mystery, it's more or less just set dressing for what's coming next, because it seems like when you wake up in the new city at the start of Chapter 3, the whole background is basically set as, oh, these three gangs are at war, the Chinese, the Koreans, and the Japanese, I believe it is, and they're about to fall apart, and as soon as you hit Chapter 4 and you realize who you're going after in that particular chapter, you think to yourself, oh, okay, we know that this relationship is unstable. We're basically just getting everyone pissed off at us so that we're the ones who knock the entire thing over later. That seems to be where the plot is going right now. It just seems to be taking a little while to get there. And I think they realize this, which is why they're adding a bit more in the way of silliness into the main plot. Now, for those of you who haven't been playing Yakuza in the past, one thing that I absolutely love about this series is their way to separate the serious and the silliness. The seriousness always happens in the main story. Everyone takes the situation with as much seriousness as it requires. There's no stupid crap like dudes in diapers wandering straight into your field of view all the time. It's simply just serious crime drama going on. And then as soon as you're out of those areas, you can walk 5 steps in any direction in the city, and you immediately fall into silliness. Like, as I said, dudes dressed in diapers is one of the series' most famously recognized side quests. So it's been good at that, but this main story seems to be letting that silliness just trickle in a little bit more to try and spice up the story when it starts to get a bit slow. And I'm a bit disappointed at that, because this is a game that goes from talking about euthanasia to having people try to open a security door with their bare hands and failing in something that looks like it's out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. And it's just kind of weird that they decide to sprinkle it in just a little bit more than they have in the previous games, and it just makes the balance feel kind of off a bit. It's not too bad right now, but considering how it's going down now, I just wonder how it's going to turn out in the future. I'll probably will be finding out, because as Yakuza, I'll be playing it all the way through when I get the time, but for now, it just seems a little bit weirdly off balance, and I hope they manage to fix it in the next few hours of the game. With that said though, what's not off balance is Ichiban, our new protagonist, who needs his entire backstory covered in the first 2 chapters, because if they don't, you've basically got nothing to work with. And while it goes over all of this really important crap really fast, it's also 2 chapters of a Yakuza game, so it's quite slow, but once you get over that little hump and start, like, taking Ichiban around the city, doing side quests, talking to your party members and all that, he actually turns out to be a really cool dude. Now, Kazuma Kiryu is a man with a heart of gold, a constitution equal to an elephant that's wearing ridiculous battle armor, and he is more than willing to help out anyone he comes across that's in trouble, right? And that's kind of the reason why you want to root for him throughout all of the Yakuza games, because he always wants to help in his own particular way, which usually involves beating the crap out of people. No argument from me, but it also means that Ichiban's got a lot to live up to, but I'm happy to say that so far he actually does. He replaces that steadfast iron will with a sort of energy, passion, and just go-hung attitude to getting stuff done, even if it means getting the shit kicked out of it. Especially in Chapter 3, where some dudes come along to rip off the hobos of some rental money. I think it's the Chinese mafia, if I remember correctly. And Ichiban is immediately like, yeah, I'm going to beat the shit out of these people if it means helping out these people who took me in and helped me. Without a single, without a single thought, he just jumps right in and helps out. And he does this multiple times throughout the story, despite an easier path always being present to him. And it gives me the same, feelings that I had with Kiryu, where he always wants to help, no matter how much danger he'll be put in. And that goes a long way. And every cutscene that he's in where he talks about wanting to be a hero because he played too much Dragon Quest while he was a kid, or he just talks about how the people of the city helped him, so he wants to help the people of the city when he was growing up. All of these little things are just adding up into a nice, enjoyable main character who doesn't take up Kazuma's mantle, but he definitely just makes a grab for it and doesn't look like an idiot in the process. So, I'll wait and see how he continues developing as the story goes on, but at this point, thumbs up, no argument from me so far. And of course, the rest of it is presented in that same high quality that Yakuza is usually presented in, with great voice work, great cutscene direction, just basically great everything as far as the usual set of things when it comes to this goes. It's always entertaining to sit and watch the cutscenes because they always put a lot of effort into them. With that said though, why aren't there more Dragon Quest references? They went to the effort of getting Dragon Quest the name in special permission from Square Enix to use it, but they only bring it up a couple of times. Otherwise, it's just kind of scrubbed or anything like that. I'd love to hear references to minor Dragon Quest characters, or just generally an idea of what Dragon Quest game he decided to play when he was a kid, so, give the fans that little bit of a thing. Or just use it outside of, one excuse of enemies transforming when you get into a battle and that's it. The only other Dragon Quest reference there is in the game, and it took me a minute to realize what this was there's people around the city that are willing to give you poke. No, I don't know what that means because you're flat broke when when the game starts. You need 50,000 yen. So I can't tell you what that means, but that's got to be a reference to an activity in Dragon Quest that they call Puff Puff, and I'll let you Google that one for yourself. Still, just a little bit disappointing. I'm hoping maybe when there's a bit more of a story development going on, they might be able to slip some more in there, but it really just seems like name dropping for the sake of name dropping at this point, and I was hoping for just that tiny little bit more. Also, one other thing. You might wonder why I haven't talked about the English voice acting. It's because I haven't listened to it. I've been playing the game entirely in Japanese because I think it's weird to play these games not in Japanese because they're meant to be like Japanese tourism. And now that I brought that point up, let's talk about the city.
なあ、難波って看護師だったんだろ？まあな。なんで辞めちまったんだ？病院の薬をくすねて闇で売ってたんだ。結構いい金になってよ。そのうち海外の医薬品まで仕入れるようになってな。手を広げすぎたらあっという間にバレちまった。まあおかげで看護師免許は剥奪されちまった。だよそれ。またバカなことやっちまったな。後悔してるよ。でもここからやり直しはいいじゃねえか。看護師は無理でも
また新しい目標だってできるだろう。
簡単に言うなよ。そういう一番はなんか目標があんのか？
いや、わかんねえ。ずっと追いかけてきた背中が目の前から消えちまったんだ。俺はその背中しか見てこなかったから、他のことなんて。
組長さんのことか？
ああ、
まあお前なら何だってできるだろう。
簡単に言うなよ。もう40超えてんだぜ。
お前さっき俺には随分簡単に言ってくれたくせによ。
だったな、悪い。
目標か。一番よ、お前子供の頃何になりたかった？
え？ああ。なんだっけな。
もったいぶるなよ。照れてんのか？
ガキの頃、俺は勇者になりたかったな。
あ？勇者？どういうこと？
ドラクエに出てくんだろ？あの勇者だよ。
それゲームのキャラだろ。ありえねえよ。
悪いかよ。
いや、まあ
そんなの自由だろ。なりたいもんになりてって。そんな夢見るくらいは自由だろ。
だよな、一番。
なんだよ。
なりゃいいじゃねえかよ、勇者。うん、なるべきだ。
やめてくれよ。それガキの頃に思ってただけで。
でも今目標はねえんだろ。じゃあ残ってる目標はそれしかねえじゃねえか。
酔っ払ったのか？だいたいそんなの職業でもねえし。
そりゃ職業じゃねえよ。でも勇者ってのはスライム倒していつか成り上がってなるもんだろ。生き様だろ。
成り上がる生き様か。
そうさ。お前なら今からだって成り上がれるぜ。
40過ぎて成り上がりか。悪くねえな。成り上がりって生き様、一丁ドーンとかましてみっか。
おお、その意気だ一番。
俺たちの輝かしい未来に乾杯だ。
うん、未来の勇者にな。
乾杯。
So the city is Yokohama. This is a brand new area, never seen before in any other Yakuza game, and it is approximately about 4 times the size of Kamurocho. And the game is incredibly linear to start with, including the fact that you don't spend the first 2 chapters in Yokohama, you spend them in Kamurocho, where the game is basically leading you around by the shirt collar because it doesn't want you to go into any of the buildings or anything in particular at that point. And that's kind of disappointing because it doesn't let you really take in the sights of the big city until like most of the way through chapter 3 and into chapter 4. So I took the opportunity and I started exploring. So yeah, I started exploring. Here's the thing that I liked about Kamurocho, because Kamurocho is like the city. It's what I think of when I think of Yakuza. I don't think of Kazuma Kiryu or Goro Majima or Tiger Saejima. I don't think of any of the characters. I think of the city. I think of Theatre Square with all the chairs you can run by and knock over. I think of the Kotobuki drug shop, which is always my first stop every time I pick up a new Yakuza game. I never think of... I think of the Millennium Tower. I think of the bloody kart racing place in the top left corner of the city. I think of the park that leads to... the bloody underground place with the fight theatre and the casino. I can't remember the name. Purgatory, that's it. Purgatory. I think of Stardust. I think of all of the places that are in Kamurocho. And all this time that I have been playing in Yakuza 7 and traveling around looking at the city so far, I've been thinking to myself, man, this is a whole lot of fucking grey. Like, the entire city, this city is huge. It takes you like 10 minutes to cross it on foot if you don't want to run into any enemy encounters, and trust me, we'll get to that. But the city is so big, but due to that, it doesn't feel anywhere near as content dense as the original games did, even Yakuza 1 and 2. It doesn't feel like it's been compressed down into just like the greatest hits of the Japanese nightlife. Instead, there's just a whole ton of grey. There are a ton of buildings that stretch up into the sky that are just grey. There's a few like different colours here and there, but many of the buildings you can't enter. And there's just nothing there really to see in comparison. They're all just so far spread out. I've spent a couple of minutes walking down streets and thinking to myself, there's nothing here. This is less detailed. This is less impressive. This doesn't even look as good as Yakuza 6 did. And it's so surprising that they went this route, because the best thing about Kamurocho was that it was so thick that you could see something interesting within eyeshot as soon as you walk into something else. In this game, you have to spend a good 30 seconds going anywhere before you find anything. The only place, like, I've spent 6 hours at the very least, possibly more, in Yokohama at this point. And the only thing I really remember about the city layout is the bars that are on the river, which is somewhere that you need to go as part of the story. I don't remember anything else. Oh, maybe the park up in the top right, but it's just a couple of trees just randomly spread out next to the dragon cart stand. That's basically all I remember. The rest of it is a freaking blur of similar streets and nothing in particular in the way of interesting activities. And that is another problem that the game also has. Now, I want to point out that I didn't get the opportunity to try very much. There are a lot of patch slot machines that I didn't get the opportunity to try out. I haven't gotten to the company building, the weapon crafting, or the battle arena yet, because they're not at this part of the game. And for the other mini games, like as I said, the patchy slot, the dragon cart, the basically everything else, even like the arcade machines and the Sega things. Actually, I'll preface this by saying that it's kind of the plot of the game that you start out broke. You have absolutely no money when you get off to the races, and you have to spend some time earning it up to the point of scrounging stuff from vending machines. I'll get into why that's a pain in the ass later, but the thing about the mini games is that you're too broke to try half of them. You know, I wanted to try out those patchy slot machines, but my save file at the time was so broke every time I was going by, I couldn't afford to go to it. After I played the rhythm game in the movie theater, I thought to myself, I'll go try that again just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And it was like 2,000 yen, and I only had 3,000 yen on me and no healing items. So I was like, no, I'm going to want to save this money. And this process was rinse and repeat over the course of the next couple of hours, because you're just so broke, you can't go around and actually experience anything. You can't like get off the main story path in order to try out some of the fun around the city outside of like the sub-stories, because you just don't have the money for it. And the other half of the problem that I'm going to bring up right now is that all the minigames I played, garbage. Like, legitimately so bad that I didn't want to play any more of them. I mean, like, they're not bad, but they're unenjoyable, not particularly deep, and not really fun to play. That's the problem. Like, whenever I play minigames in Yakuza, or things that split off into side stories or something like that, I always think back to Yakuza 5, where you had two completely different minigames for Kiryu at the beginning of the game, where you had the ability to be a Eurobeat drift racer up on the Tokyo highways, or you could be a proper taxi driver that had to obey the road rules, use your blinkers, not run off, not go straight into pedestrian crossings or anything like that. And those games were in-depth, they were fun. They had a lot going for them, especially the proper rule-following taxi driving one. In this game, you've got the movie theater, which is just press some buttons. You've got Sujimon, which is basically just your traditional RPG style, whatchamacallit, bestiary that you just need to fill out by defeating random dudes. You've got Can Quest, which is so simple that I managed to get A's and S's all the time just by replaying it and going for a very simple strategy, which is go for the big piles, always have a boost can handy, never lose. And Dragon Kart. I was so looking forward to playing Dragon Kart. A cross-city kart race with proper weapons and just general, like, really crazy courses and all that. And then I played it and it was boring as sin. The karts stick to the road like they're freaking super glued, unless you're drifting, in which case they just don't feel right at all. There's no real drifting to them whatsoever. It's just a sharper turn. The courses themselves are completely uninteresting. The weapon power-ups are even less so, and it's just no fun. I played through the first Grand Prix, I got, like, the faster car, and I stood no chance of losing. Even after colliding with the wall a couple of times, I still didn't lose, despite the fact I didn't even upgrade my car. I upgraded my car for what I plotted to be the second Grand Prix, but after I realized that it required like an entry fee of 3,000 yen and I just blew 20,000 yen on upgrading my car, again, I was out of money, so I couldn't play anymore. It's just... I don't get it. How do they make a game so engaging like the hunting minigame in Yakuza 5, which I literally stopped all my main story progress for hours just to play the hunting minigame, because that was fun as hell. It was so in-depth with how you had to go about your business there. Even the minigames in Yakuza 6 had a bit more depth than this, but in this they just feel like distractions. And again, haven't seen the company building, haven't seen the weapon crafting, haven't seen the ballerina, but yeah, this is Yakuza. You know how those go down if you've played any other games before it, and considering the general like turn they've taken towards the full-on RPG aspects of things, you'd expect them to be relatively similar to what they were before. There are some mechanics taken from Persona as well. You've got social links that you get by talking to your people and fighting with them. You've got personality traits which will affect some of your attacks and things that you can say. And this all does help you in battle, but the gain rates on all of them are so slow that by Chapter 4 I haven't really had an opportunity to experience them all yet, so couldn't tell you anything about them, man. I have some minor annoyances about the way the game seems to have taken on the bigger city Persona as well. But these are all just kind of like random stuff that's out of the way. It's not really relevant to the city portion of things, but this is the only place where I'm really going to be able to bring them up, so I'll talk about them now. You know treasure hunting, which I mentioned earlier? It's a mechanic that's mentioned where you have to go hunting for treasure underneath the vending machines and all that you see out in the thing. But once you do it the first time, you never want to do it again, because this is the sort of game where it's like, hey, you looked under this vending machine, here's 5 yen. Oh, you also beat this group of dudes, here's 100 yen. So even if you were to go to 20 vending machines and get 100 yen from under all of them, it still feels incredibly slow to just walk up to all of them, press the button, and hope you don't get nothing, because a lot of the time you do get nothing. So it just feels like something that's meant to piss me off. Here's another thing about the open world that kind of annoys me too, the bigger city I mean. The city is huge, as I said before, so you feel like you're going to be a lot more reliant on taxis, especially when it comes to the combat, which again, I'm about to get to, but just let me talk about this. There are taxis around town that you can go hop into to get a ride to another part of the city, but for whatever bloody reason, you need to actively go up to the taxi and press A on them in order to actually open them, in order to go for a ride somewhere else, or to be able to be dropped off there later, instead of just like walking past them and having them unveiled on your minimap. I did not realize this until I'd already walked past about 7 taxis and realized, oh, the game won't actually let me go anywhere. That's bizarre. I don't know why they've done that. The game also has a couple of things where it's just like, I didn't really think this through. Here's the 2 examples that I've come up with, but there are a couple of really minor ones as well, which I probably should have written down because I completely forgot about them. But here are the 2 that I know of. One of the loading game tips early on that you see has a hint about something called a silver key, a silver safe skeleton key, where the game tells you that there are silver safes and gold safes. Silver safes need a skeleton key, but gold safes need a gold key, and you can only use a gold key once. The skeleton key can be used all the time to open up silver safes. So I'm like, okay, that's probably going to be a reward for a major side quest or something along those lines. For whatever reason, they give it to you at the very beginning of Chapter 3 and it's never brought up again. It literally just comes up in a text box that says, hey, you got the silver skeleton key. Now you can open every silver safe in the game. And then I went looking for silver safes and I couldn't find them because they're all in the story missions. So why did the game bother telling me about these in the first place and instead just have like regular old storage boxes you can find? Because they have plenty of items lying around the levels as well. They just also have these gigantic silver safes that stand out like a sore thumb, that take no challenge to open whatsoever, not even lockpicking a la Judgment, and they just give you like higher quality equipment. And it's like, why did you bother with this in the first place? Why not just have it be an extra item drop? I have no idea. But there's another one that happens towards the end of Chapter 4, which really grinds my gears for some reason, and I don't know why they didn't think about this. So, in Chapter 4, you have caught out a Yakuza on his shit, and he's taking you to the headquarters of his family so that you can go and tell the head boss about it. But before you go in, you press A on him to talk to him and be like, hey, yeah, I'm ready to go. He says to you, hey, you're not taking this seriously. You need to go and armor up and item up, because this game's got the old-fashioned armor mechanics. You got head, feet, body, 2 accessories, and a weapon. And he's like, no, you need to go armor up. So I went and played a couple of rounds of Can Quest, which I hated because it's really such a simple game that there's just no point to playing it. Got myself some armor, went back, and the next story beat happened, and then as soon as you're in the lobby of the place, the walls drop, and the guy says, hey, I was actually going to trap you all along, now I'm going to beat the shit out of you and dump you in the river. Why would he bother telling me to go get armor? Now, it's actually the guy in question telling you that you aren't taking this seriously. Go and get yourself some armor before I let you in the building. And then he tries to kill you. It doesn't make any sense. Not to mention, this is Yakuza. This is a game where you are never gated in relation to your abilities for the most part, right? Like, there are some training places which are like, hey, you need to go and get better at this style, or you need to come back later on in the story to learn this move. But in the main story itself, you're never gated off. In this game, where you have very little in the way of resources to begin with, asking you to fully armor and accessorize up in order to actually get into this building is not only a kick in the pants, but nothing like the rest of the game. So, the rest of the series, I should say. So I admit, I'm not a fan of the way that went down. I am not a fan of the way that went down. And now we get to talk about the combat.
母さんの味思い出したぞ。この隠し味は塩だ。母さんの秘伝のレシピしかと受け継いだ。これからも俺は料理に生きる。面白かったな。おう。おう。ああ。お前らに会長室の指揮はまたがせれ。だったら力ずくで突っ切るしかねえな。行くぞ!
Now let's talk about the combat. So the combat is different from the rest of the series. So the combat in Yakuza 1 through 6 and all of the other games so far is a high-speed action brawler where you beat the crap out of a bunch of dudes via normal and special attacks, using heat moves in order to beat the absolute crap out of them in some really fancy pre-done animations. And just a bunch of other things along those lines, along with like item usage, different weapons available to you, and all of that sort of stuff in order to make it a really interesting sort of combat system. And Yakuza 7 has rolled this into a new turn-based combat system where you tell your dudes to do stuff and they'll run up to them and do stuff, and then it's another person's turn. And I thought to myself, okay, these are the people who developed Yakuza. These are the people who made some really fun, interesting, and exciting brawling into an absolute gigantic monolith of a series. I can see this working if they put a little bit of their special touch into it. So let's talk about the absolute basics of it first. It's more or less traditional RPG tropes for the most part. You've got your basic attacks, you've got your basic guards, which will reduce the amount of damage you take, elemental resistances and weaknesses combined with status effects, so paralyze, poison, fear, rage is another one. Those all mean exactly what you think they mean if you've played an RPG that uses them before. So it's all the real basic stuff. Everyone's got MP. There's no such thing as heat anymore, which I'm actually really disappointed by because I love the idea of building up heat and using it to just absolutely beat the crap out of several dudes at once. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about this combat system. And you've got MP, which are used for your special attacks, and those special attacks have button mashing on X and precision mashing on Y, and I could not for the life of me figure out what time you need to hit the Y button, because the game is not specific as to where you need to hit the Y button. So in every other game of this type that I've played, including Yakuza itself, well, in at least one case, I think, I'd be lying if I could tell you which game though, where there's a big circle around the outside of a button prompt and it shrinks in. Then you've got to press the Y button whenever it's in the circle, because this Y button has the circle around the outside of it, right? That circle around the Y button is a red herring. You have to let the ring go all the way in and then press the Y button, and that's what gets you the damage boost. This pisses me off for some reason, I have no idea why. You can also press the B button when you're being attacked to throw up a guard, which does less damage, although sometimes you take even more damage. I'm not even kidding. I've got footage where you take 1 damage from the first hit when you don't perfect guard it, but then you perfect guard it and you take 5 damage. That makes no sense to me. But anyway, we'll move on from that. Those are the basics, and the skills can do anything from cause your status effects to give you positive ones like attack up and defense up and what have you, to just beating the crap out of people, to tag team attacks, which do a lot of damage for a lot of MP. I've just seen the basics so far. I don't see if they're doing any major attempts, mechanically wise, to really shake it up in the same way that you could use heat for multiple things, whether it be for counter attacks, just straight up attacks, or a couple of other purposes, right? But I'll only tell you where this battle system really falls down for me. The first way that it really falls down for me is the locational strategy. Now, in a traditional turn-based RPG, enemies are on one side, you're on the other, you throw attacks back and forth, position has nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, in Yakuza, all of the enemies are moving around to make it so that you have to do things along the lines of pick your targets carefully, because if you decide to do a regular attack and you run straight through someone, it means that that attack is going to get blocked. Same thing for the enemies, actually. But there are attacks that actually make use of this feature. One is of Ichiban's baseball bat attack, where he swings around in a circle and hits a wide AoE of people. Then you've got Nanba, who's basically your mage, who can throw out fire spit and do damage to everyone within a certain area. But the game is really inconsistent about where this area is. It's not really helped out by the fact that everyone is moving around while you're selecting options. So when you select an option like attack, for example, let's just say that you've got what you are on the bottom left corner of the screen, the enemy you want to attack is in the top right corner of the screen, and in the idle animation there's some dude wandering over just out of your line of sight that you can't see yet. You press the attack button, you press A, and after you've selected it, this guy has come into your field of view that you couldn't see. So you run straight up and you run straight into him and your attack gets blocked. This happens a lot. And it's even worse when it comes to the area of effect attacks, because with everyone constantly moving around while you're working on what might be the best strategy to use at this particular moment, you can't see everybody. You can't predict where they're going to go. They're not going to stand still. And when it comes to someone like Nanba, whose area of effect attack is so inconsistent that it won't hit an enemy standing directly fucking behind him. At least the guy that you're targeting, I mean. It just gets inherently frustrating to deal with. And then you get some absolute bullshit, like got pulled on me at the end of the dungeon that you have to crawl through as part of Chapter 4, where you have to fight a sub-boss who has the ability to do a brutal charge, where he'll pick up an item and run straight at you. The game will automatically move one of your dudes from off-screen to directly fucking in front of the character who's being attacked, so both of you get damaged at the same time. They will warp over with a snap of the fingers. It is so unbelievably bullshit. And this crap happens all the time. It happens all the time. And one of the major things that they've got going about this game is like, one of the major tactics they try to tell you right at the very beginning is knock a dude on his ass, then get a second dude in. It's always going to be a critical hit the second time, which does more damage. The game tries to prevent you from doing this a lot. So there are some, sometimes you'll just end up behind a building when the battle starts and you'll have to run in to get that second hit in, and it just doesn't work because the guy got up too quickly. There's a couple of times where I've tried that, but I've brushed my hand against a guy's fist and it counts as a block. There's a couple of things along those lines which I just, that's so frustrating to deal with. And it just makes the game really frustrating to play as a result, because you just have to work around all this bullshit. And it's not helped out by a couple of other location-required things as well. One of the things that you could do in the Yakuza games Mainline and Judgment is pick up items that are on the ground and swing them at enemies in order to hit them. This game does that too, but what you need to do is have them positioned somewhere where you can, when you do your regular attack, you run through the object you want to pick up. And it seemed to be at the game's discretion whether or not you try and kick the object in the enemy's face or pick it up and use it as a battering ram. Again, it feels random. It feels stupid. It feels incredibly frustrating to deal with, as I have already said like 3 or 4 times. Because in the original Yakuza games, it was your choice whether or not you went and grabbed that and used it as something to help you block or something to swing away with. It was always your choice when to use these heat attacks and how many dudes they would affect. It was always your choice. In this game, it feels like choice is being taken away from you because one computer player decided to walk 10 feet to the left and now he's invulnerable while you're trying to do your attack. You also have no control over where your dudes are standing, so if all 3 of them, by sheer dumb luck, end up in the same area, you just take massive amounts of damage. I haven't seen anything that does that yet, but I'm willing to bet it's coming, because there's no way that it's not with bullshit going on like this. The second thing I hate about the game's combat is the speed, because the combat encounters in this game are really, really slow. There are an absolute ton of them as well. I'll get into why this is a pain in the ass later, but they're all way slower than old Yakuza fights, because not only in the old Yakuza fights could you beat the crap out of dudes within like 10 seconds once you got powerful enough, these games take at least 30. And you don't even get the auto battle option until at least partway through Chapter 3. At which point you can turn it on and realize that this AI isn't very intelligent. They won't work together on the same one. They won't like go after dudes that have been knocked on the ground half the time. They do sometimes, but they don't other times. And they won't do anything particularly intelligent. You can tell them whether or not you want them to use skills or to focus on healing each other or anything like that. But you still also have to do those precision attacks, which means that if you get into a fight that you don't want to play, if you want to maintain your dude's health, you have to be there ready to press the B button. It's not something you can just skip. So it just gets really, really frustrating and really long in the tooth because you have to spend so much time whittling away dudes. And again, it just drives me insane how slow it is. I'm really disappointed with the way it came out. You also get way less in the way of rewards. You get nowhere near the same amount of money. Leveling up is a lot slower than it used to be. And yeah, as I said, you don't even get auto battle for the first couple of chapters. So you just have to sit through hammering away at the A button because you want to save all your MP in order to, in order to actually finish all of these fights. And again, you've got so little money that you can't go and buy MP restoratives this early on in the game, which means you really do want to be saving that MP for when it's important. And thirdly, I already mentioned this, the battles happen a lot. There are way too many of them. You're running around the city and you run into like a group of 2 or 3 people, right? You fight them, you get some rewards, all good. Nowhere near the amount of rewards that you would usually get. You don't get like the Tauriners or the Toughnesses or even a decent amount of money anymore. The most money I've seen you get out of a fight in this game is like 3,000 yen. And that was a boss fight. I might be misremembering that, but I mean, it really is true. You get nothing in comparison to the previous games, and everything is just that bit more expensive. But yes, you end up fighting like a group of dudes in the street. You beat them, you get your rewards, right? And then you immediately come out of the fight, and you've got your radar in the bottom left, which tells you where dudes are and what their vision cone is. And there will be a second group right in the direction of where you are going, ready to fight you again. 15 steps away, if not that. For a city that's like 3 times as big and takes 4 times the amount of time to get across. It is legitimately retarded how many enemies spawn in this game, and there is so many combat encounters that you want to avoid. You can avoid them. I will point out that you can avoid them, but their vision codes are so wide that they usually take up the entirety of the street, so you either have to wait for them to pass, find another way around, or very slowly wait for them to walk by, or rather, step into just their field of view and then walk away to hopefully reset their pathing and send them in a completely different direction to the way they were walking, which doesn't even work half the time because it'll just send them in the direction that you wanted to go in the first place, and you might as well just go around and save yourself the trouble, at which point you'll run immediately into another set of dudes. But this is also really screwed up on another level, because you can run into groups of dudes that are like 10 levels higher than you and can take out half your health bar in one shot just by trying to go to a sub-story that you've just unlocked. I had this problem going through, going to the north of the city, trying to unlock the Dragon card minigame, where I kept running into groups of dudes that were 10 levels higher than me and were taking off a third to a half of my health bar in one shot. And you can't run away from fights once you're in them either. I mean, you can. Technically, you can. But the probability of it happening unless you're higher level than the enemy is so low that it just feels like you're going to be stuck in this area forever trying to get away before all your dudes get knocked out and you get a game over. And it drives me nuts. Compare this to Yakuza, where you could run away from a battle as soon as you got into it and then just keep running. And you would eventually just, get away from it no problem whatsoever. As a result, it makes exploring the city kind of difficult, because if you want to get to the north side of the thing to get your dragon cart going on, you have to do the shimmy around these giant groups of enemies with their massive vision codes, which means that you're going to be spending a lot more time trying to navigate them than you are navigating the city, and it just makes city exploration even more worse than it already is, because again, you're broke at this point of the game. So as a result, yeah. And one other thing about the combat, I haven't mentioned the pound mates, mainly because they haven't come up. They only came up in Chapter 4, and even then, I only got one of them, right? And it's a dude who was in the previous games, Gary Buster Holmes. And he comes in, he does a massive attack on all the dudes in the battle, and has a chance of stunning them. But in a game where I barely have earned like 50 to 60,000 yen, he costs 10,000 yen per use. So, why would I bother? I could spend that money on enough healing to get me through a battle 3 times as long, with the amount of damage like 3 times as much as the amount of damage that Gary Buster Holmes might throw out. So why would I even bother when there's so little money to go around, at least in this point of the game? And that's it. That's basically all I've got to say about Like a Dragon so far. It's not a terrible game, but all of these things adding together are just making me really not appreciate the swap to the open world gameplay. And you can just kind of follow, not by open world gameplay, I mean like the biggest city style of gameplay, because you can kind of follow it down the track, right? You can kind of feel where they had to go with this. They thought to themselves, oh, we need to do an RPG. So we need to add in this, and this to make it feel like a proper RPG. We need to add in a bigger world. But now we've got no time to enhance or make really cool activities. So we just have to make surface level ones and hope for the best. Oh, we need to make this city a little bit more lively because we didn't have enough time to do it up on the same level of detail as Camera Roadshow. So let's just add a bunch of dudes running around so it feels like more of a trial to get through. We need to change up the combat, but we don't really know what to do with it once we go turn-based RPG if we're not going to have heat. So we're just going to run off the basic things, but we're going to go with a real-time system that brings back memories of the old Yakuza fights, but this real-time system just doesn't work in a turn-based strategy setting at all. And it doesn't even look that great. The combat animations aren't as good as they used to be. The fights aren't as engaging to watch. And even when the camera splits off and you get like those cool old segments that used to be full of QuickTime events that were full of absolutely ridiculous gymnastics and just fists of fury and carnage and what have you, it doesn't work the same. And they even took out the QuickTime events. Even something as simple as like hammering away at the X button or doing the precision on the Y button or having this block on the B button so that you could just, you could have some sort of replicant of that old system. It just isn't there. So I blame the turn-based combat for everything being the way that it is in this game and everything that I don't like. Everything being so simple and unimpressive, like Can Quest, the movie theater, or Dragon Kart. Having really boring side quests like Sujimon, which is just a bestiary. I don't know what the other ones are going to be like yet, but I'm guessing it's just going to be this traditional Yakuza fare, so... yeah. And unfortunately, the game reviewed really well, and I haven't heard most people bringing up any of these problems. And I don't know if Japan feels the same way about it. I'm actually curious as to that now. How the hell am I going to look it up? I don't even have the Japanese name. Oh, whatever. No, I won't bother. I'll probably come back to it and finish it at some point because it's Yakuza, but all of my experiences so far have been everything from at least positive when it comes to Ichiban and his characterization to intensely frustrating like some of the things the combat system makes you do. I wouldn't recommend it. Honestly wouldn't. I would tell you to go and play the original Yakuza games first. Start with 0 and work your way up. That is what I would tell you to do. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you... Actually, that's a good question. Chances are the day that you see this going up is the day that I'm getting my PlayStation 5, so maybe around the time this goes live, I might be here with my PlayStation 5 doing streams, because I'd like to experience all of that not only live, but record a bunch of footage, because I ended up recording like 12 hours of footage of this, only to end up using an hour of it. So, yeah, apologies for that. Let's just end off with the catchphrase. I'll see you all next time. That's a terrible catchphrase, I really should change it.
俺の番か。どうするか。
一つ上の男。